Hey, this is Philip from Stevenson Motor Co. And today we're going to show you everything you need to know about the removal and function of a classic mini front subframe. The classic mini front subframe is bolted from the bottom of the car, so in order to take it off, we need to get the car off its wheels. The first step is to put the Mini on jack stands. If you're not sure how to do it, feel free to check out our video. Now we've got the car safely on 4 jack stands. It's worth noting that if you are removing your subframe with the engine still attached, now is the point that you're going to want to remove any connections between the body of the car and the engine. Because the front of the car is supported with the jack stands on the subframe, and we want to remove the subframe out the bottom of the car, we're going to need to move where we put the jack stands. Because the Mini's body is not actually designed to have the weight of the jack stands on it, we're going to need to distribute the load, and we're doing this with a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. Now you might be wondering, why don't we just lift up the car initially with the plywood on the body? And it's because if you're removing anything from the engine bay, it's just best practice to have the car safely lifted via the subframes. So let's get this under the body of the car. Now we've got the car supported by a piece of plywood just behind the front subframe. Only a couple more things to disconnect and they'll be ready to drop out from underneath the car. Take the wheels off. Next we're going to disconnect the outer tie rod. And lastly we want to take off the lower bolt of the front shock. With that removed, the shock can just hang free here. So we're under the car right now. We're looking at the back of the front subframe. Now, right here you can see there's actually a rubber spacer on both sides here. This rubber spacer is on all 1976 and later cars. They all came rubber mounted. And what that means is that the subframe isn't directly bolted to the chassis of the car as it is in a pre-1976 Mini, but it is suspended by rubber bushings. Now these rubber bushings deteriorate over time, and it's always a good idea to replace them either with new ones or poly bushings, or in our case with solid mounts, and this will create a much better handling car. So we're going to begin dropping the subframe by removing the rear mounts. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take out the 2 nuts and bolts that hold the subframe to the mount. Hallelujah. Okay, and then just repeat for both sides. There are 2 bolts at the front of the subframe. Sometimes they are tie downs like this, and sometimes they're just a conventional bolt. Either way, it'll be a 9/16 nut on the back side over here. And there you have it. The only thing now supporting the front subframe is 2 1 5/16 bolts. So first what we have to do is support the subframe before we can remove these so that it doesn't just drop out the bottom. Now that's a wrench! So we should be ready to drop it now. Just do one last check, make sure everything's disconnected, nothing's hanging up the subframe, and get ready to drop it out of the bottom of the car.
Good tech.
Alright, we got the subframe up on the bench and cleaned off a bit. We figured it'd be a good time now to show everybody the components, how it's put together, and how it all functions. So on the classic Mini, the engine, transmission, suspension, and brakes is all retained by the front subframe. If we imagine this is the front of the car and this is the back of the car here, we've got, much like the rear, we've got rubber cones, and they're located right up here. And there's a trumpet underneath that pushes on the upper control arm. The upper control arm is then linked to a spindle, which is connected to the car with a lower control arm and a strut rod, sometimes called a tension control rod here. Because the classic Mini is an older car design, it has some maintenance requirements that you might not have to do on a newer car. Some of those include grease points. So the upper control arm here, it rotates on a pair of needle bearings. Now these needle bearings need grease, and there is a grease nipple right on the bottom here that needs to be serviced. There's also 2 grease points on the ball joints, upper and lower right here, and you need to take care to grease those as well. Now, the lower control arm and the tension control rod or strut rod are held by rubber bushings. Now these rubber bushings deteriorate over time, and when they do deteriorate, it allows the hub assembly and your alignment to flex as you are accelerating and braking, and this can cause some uneasy handling. So those are definitely something to pay attention to when you're inspecting your subframe. And keep your eye out for one of our next videos. We're going to show you some neat upgrades you can do to your suspension to make it handle even better than it did from factory. Alright, I hope you liked our video on the front subframe. If you have any tips or tricks, feel free to put them in the comment section. Stay tuned for more videos as we continue to work on our latest project car. And if you like our videos, please like and subscribe.